June reading wrap-up. That's what we're doing today. We're talking about all the books that I read in June. My name is Colin. Let's get into it. In June, I read a total of 6 complete books, listened to an audiobook, and started a 7th big chunky boy, but we'll get into that later. First, let's start talking about the standalone books that I read. The first book I'd like to talk about is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book is great. It's about characters who are game designers, or their journey to becoming game designers, their relationships with each other, how they develop, and it's also got a lot of elements of mental health, dealing with chronic injury and sort of the ramifications of how that affects life and relationships. It's really well written. I'd say personally, I really enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the plot. I thought it was very well thought out. I didn't actually like the characters that much. I thought all of them felt a little selfish, in my opinion, but maybe that's just me. All in all, I think this book was really good. If you enjoy literary fiction and you enjoy not straightforward, I guess, love stories, this one might be for you. It's pretty good. Next up, we've got Babel by R.F. Kuang. R.F. Kuang is a brilliant author. This was my favorite read of 2023 so far. It's set in a fictional version of Oxford University. It's got a bit of fantasy sprinkled in, not a lot, just a little bit of magic to spice things up, if you will. It's not a spicy book, don't get me wrong.
It's not that kind of spice.
It's loaded with a lot of like academic, especially linguistic and translational academic themes, since it is dark academia. It tackles themes of identity in a colonial setting, and it addresses some of the issues with 18th century, especially British colonialism, very well, and makes some very good points about the problems with colonialism and its ramifications. It's also a very dark book. It's dark academia. You're not going to go into this expecting, the happiest of endings, but I think it concludes in a very nice way. I personally enjoyed the ending a lot, even though it's not an ending that makes you go, oh yay, unicorns and rainbows. So that's another book that I read. Now onto the series that I completed in June. I started the Witcher book series in May, and I finished the last 4 books in June. In general, I really enjoyed the series. I had some issues with it. I'm going to do a full review video soon. We've got Baptism of Fire, which is book 3 in the saga. We've got The Tower of Swallows, which I think might have been my favorite book in the series. This is the only one that I read in a day. I also had a lot of time that day, but it's the only one that I read in a day. We have The Lady of the Lake, which is the 5th book in the saga. This was actually probably my least favorite up until the halfway point, and then it got good again. But the first half of this book is just so long-winded and unnecessary, in my opinion. We'll talk about that more in the review. Regardless of it, I really enjoyed the series. And finally, we have the last published book, Season of Storms, which is a standalone sort of prequel. It happens before the saga, somewhere between the short stories in The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, which, are probably the stronger books in the series. The short stories and the standalone novel are a little bit better than the saga. In total, I still enjoy the story. It took me a little bit of time to understand what Andrzej Sapkowski, I don't know how to pronounce that name properly, but what he was trying to do. And when I did, my appreciation for this series just went pew, pew, pew. Until that point, I was just like, this is just kind of dark, gritty fantasy. There's a lot of unnecessary grit that just felt overdone. Anyways, for the most part, Witcher series, really good. Go read it if you like fantasy. I think it should be up there with the classics. It's got a well-deserved spot on sort of the echelons of big epic fantasy series. Geralt is a badass. There's no doubt about it. That's all I have to say about that for now. Review video coming soon. The audiobook that I listened to in June is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. I've never hated a well-written book as much. And I know it's very much a preference thing. I did not like the way that story went at all. The first half of the book, I was in love. I could not stop listening. And then, if you've read the book, you will know a big sort of epic climactic twist occurs, and then the story changes its tone completely. And after that point, I was just like, this is not how I expected, how I wanted, or how I felt this story should have gone. And I know what the author was trying to do, or what the author intended to do, and I think the author did that very well, but I didn't like it. And I know that's a very personal thing, it's a preference thing, but I felt the execution of the second half of that book. Maybe it just wasn't for me, but I didn't think it was very well done. I think one of the characters got a bit of a redemption arc, which I did not appreciate at all. I can't talk about it more without getting into major spoilers, and we're not going to do that here. Anyways, Sword of Kaigen, mixed feelings. I think it's very well written. The action sequences are some of the most well-written action sequences in any book that I've ever read. If there's one thing that Wang really does well, it's action sequences. And just for that, it's actually worth reading, despite the fact that I hated the book. I think I gave it a 2-star rating in my Bookstagram review. Finally, let's talk about what I started in June and have not yet finished. It's going to take a while to get through all of these, but I started the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, something that I probably should have done ages ago since I am a big fantasy reader, but I'm only just getting to this series now. I am a little bit less than halfway through the book, as you can see. There's my bookmark. It feels very much like we're setting up for something epic. And I mean, it is a 14-book series. It's a big commitment, and you can feel that this is just setting up. Halfway through a 700-page book, and we're still getting into the setup, but it doesn't feel slow. It feels good. And I understand why so many people say this series is some of the best fantasy that's ever been written. It's not taken over Lord of the Rings for me yet, which is my favorite series. The Hobbit is one of my favorite books. I love the Silmarillion. That's not what we're talking about today, but yeah. So Wheel of Time, I'll be talking about this more on the channel, I guess, as I go through the series. This has been my June wrap-up. I'm a bookish Colin. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and have a great day.